mean, it's great because usually the memory panel is, the grimmest panel of all, and now we just kind of loosen the atmosphere, lighten up, and right before all the storm will come, which I would actually encourage. Like, I would encourage analytical and multifaceted approaches. So for us, that's very, very important. Although we must never remember to, we must never forget to laugh. Okay, well, I think let's start, and then as students will finish at the mayor's, they will possibly come and arrive as a group. So this panel, as you must have seen in the program, was set up to discuss processes of collective memory and memory politics in the way they relate to the dynamics of international relations, and how diplomacy and the discourses of diplomacy are very much defined by legacies of memory discourses of earlier past traumas, and as the Canadian professor said yesterday, bad histories. I'm not sure that we can call them bad histories, but and I would certainly be critical of that very highly provocative term. However, memories are all, usually we say, they're never set and consensual. And there was a very interesting thing that this Canadian professor said yesterday, kind of repeating this strange East versus West memory discourse that the Western societies have sort of more solidified consensual memory narratives and consensual history narratives, therefore. And somehow in the Balkans and also East and Central Europe, there's this notion that we deal with melancholia instead. So it's a very interesting kind of dichotomy, which I would also be very critical about. I would also be highly cautious of. However, it was very strange that it was brought up yesterday, and I wanted to refer back to it. And if you have any thoughts on it, please, in the light of the following talks, don't hesitate to make comments and ask. Let me introduce András Nagy, professor who you already know because he was here on Sunday and Monday as well. And he will give the keynote this morning on exactly these larger issues of international institutions and how their workings are closely related to dilemmas concerning histories, problematic histories, and controversial memory narratives. So, András, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be back and to give the keynote speech for such a complicated topic where neither melancholy nor optimism is not involved, but it's a kind of global understanding how memories are working, how traumas influence not only international relations, but international institutions. And I will try to give you some examples in the form of a kind of history class. And very briefly, just to talk about memory politics, you can see that each collective identity have beyond a kind of country, nation, ethnicity with its own narrative. And obviously, as we could witness it yesterday, these are often confronting each other. And is it possible to obtain a real collectivity behind all these very, very dramatically different narratives? Because historical experiences determine mentality, remembrance, behavior, and the wish for joining forces, which in a globalized context became more and more important, and this definitely influenced our agenda in a globalized context. International relations are par excellence determined by the past. You can see that all these major international organizations are born or were born from past, sometimes kind of previous tragedies and experiences. And the international rules and regulations focus on expected future developments, somehow that we predict from past events as extrapolations of existing tendencies. So collective actions to avoid conflicts, to guarantee security, achieve a peaceful future. And I want to show you 3 case studies which are still our contemporaries. One is the Red Cross. You could see it also in the Gaza hostage exchange, another the Hague International Court, and the United Nations. We were already touching upon on the first day, but still it demands a bit more of elaboration, even if my time is limited, and I will try to observe also the time limit, so I have my watch here as well. So all these are very important historical achievements, and we shall show how important they were when they were created. They are present in our life as well. They are stories of successes and failures as well, and their history is opening up in the context of the general history of humanity. Their narratives are as mirroring the European and global challenges and the answers given, and the international challenges are answered, and we shall see how these answers unveil. We go back more than 150 years to Solferino, which was the greatest battle after Waterloo for the unification of Italy, where our army, a Hungarian general, was commanding the Austrian army, unfortunately, or obviously, so we lost. And there were 30,000 dead and 40,000 who were wounded, and that was the bloodiest battle, and there were no medical treatment. More victims were dying after the battle than during the battle, and there were horrifying scenes and enormous suffering. So it's, in one side, a kind of bright moment of the Italian history, and the other side, a major and a kind of collective tragedy for both for the winners and for the losers. And there was Jean-Henri Dunant, a Swiss businessman who just wanted to make some business with Napoleon III in Algeria and other places, and he arrived to the scene of the battle totally unprepared what's going to happen, and then saw the soldiers on the field in agonies and sufferances, and left his business plan and started to help with the local villagers involved, and there was relief assistance, and there were no discrimination, whoever was the guilty or who was the innocent in a sense, and he published a book with the title of Memory of Solferino. So you can see that the memory, 3 years after the event, was already part of memory, and then through the Geneva Society of Public Welfare, a very important person, the head of this society, Gustave Moynier, joined, and they decided that they will do something about this situation. And the book was published, and Remembering the Nightmare, and they decided to create an organization to assistance, regardless of political, national, military, and other considerations, based on Calvinist, I mean, that kind of morality, very deeply rooted in the Swiss mentality, but reaching out beyond. And you can see that today we have even the Red Crescent, we have also the Red Crystal, which can help the Israelis who obviously dislike either the cross or the crescent as a kind of symbol. Humanitarian organization envisioned at times bridging over all differences, and the principles often debated were impartiality, neutrality, independence, voluntary service, and universality. Very contradictional if you go to each case studies when the Red Cross was working. Very well organized, it's a Swiss way, and that headquarters is in Switzerland until today, and the chief officers are all Swiss citizens. But there are also the local Red Cross societies, so it became a kind of grassroots movement as well, forming a federation, a league, and there is the International Committee of the Red Cross. And obviously it's not only the Red Cross, not only humanitarian assistance, but the Geneva Conventions you heard about. This was also initiated by the Red Cross, and the First World War, that was extremely important. It was the largest bloodshed in the 20th century. They were establishing contacts between the wounded soldiers and family, visiting the prisoners of war, intervening of use of weapons causing extreme sufferance like the gas. And also the volunteers in national societies were very, very instrumental in helping. They established the first ambulance services. And in 1919, there was already established a League of Red Cross Societies, non-political international organization. And again, an interesting footnote that in 1919, when there was the Hungarian Council of Republics, the first communist coup in Hungary and the second in the world after the Bolshevik Revolution, the Red Cross could visit the political prisoners taken by the communists. So it was a very interesting, a first case to see how they are treated. And obviously, the conflicts in the civil wars in the 20s, in the 30s, they tried to work as a neutral intermediary, shaping international relations on a basic level in the long run. So that was a kind of model institution for international relations based on a trauma, how the trauma can elaborate it, and from a point of view of a neutral society. The stress test was the Second World War. They provided relief supply wherever it was possible, and the Swiss neutrality was extremely important to be able to work properly. However, we know about the responsibilities of Switzerland, how they had very, very, very good terms with the Nazis, who could deposit all their robbed wealth there, and they were silenced. They couldn't help in the Holocaust. Later, they couldn't help for the Soviet prisoners of war taken by the Germans, neither for the Germans prisoners of war taken by the Soviets. So, I mean, there was this major failures of the stress test, but yet they were for example, messages were taken, transmitted by the Red Cross societies throughout the war, which was extremely important. And before the world of the computerization, after the Second World War, people could connect to each other via the Red Cross. They had more than 1 million small pieces of paper with all the possible data about prisoners, displaced persons, and others. So that were different levels of international relations, organizations from a grassroots situation, and yet it became one of the most important humanitarian organization. And in the Cold War, there were challenging narratives. This is just the last chapter about the Red Cross. They were assisting in natural disasters. It was very interesting that behind the Iron Curtain, the first time in Hungary they could come here when there was in 1956 major floods. And that was the precedent how they could come after the 1956 revolution, that they had been already in the country. And there was the Geneva Conventions, which were only slowly accepted. New conventions were established. A global presence was created throughout all of the countries that were involved, and a legal basis to work out, because sometimes there were no legal basis for the intervention of the Red Cross, and yet they tried to do that. The Soviet and the communist propaganda was obviously very suspicious and very often quite anti-Red Cross, and they said it's a kind of bourgeois aristocratic initiative, and they just curing not the substance, which is the class struggle, but only the consequences. And there are always the second agenda of the donors, so they just want to influence let's say, the communist countries where these Red Cross societies were established to take to be this kind of work as a smokescreen for subversive activity. But obviously, after Stalin has died, this became much less crucial. The other important organization is the Hague International Court. Again, you may not recognize that that's Tsar Nicholas II who initiated the peace conference, because he said that already disarmament is such an important issue at the end of the 19th century that we have to do something about that. And why should countries fight wars with each other when we have an international set of laws and regulations? So he initiated this peace conference, and also it was very important because the pacific settlement of international disputes would forever eliminate all the wars of the 20th century. And he was also afraid because there were all these very important, very dangerous new weapons, like the Zeppelin. This is a large German Zeppelin that the technical development of methods meant a change in the warfare. So they were afraid that even the United States can be reached by these Zeppelins and they can bomb the East Coast, and also the great powers' ambitions to have some limits for the arm race, which started to be, due to the technical achievements, very dramatic at the end of the 19th century. And also, it was very important, the development of the international legal authority was extremely important, and the major forum was the Hague International Court. There was a peace conference also 7 years before the First World War started, and they established a permanent court with judges, so they can, in that way, take care of all the international controversies to have a peaceful settlement. And also, Andrew Carnegie gave this beautiful palace where still today is working the Hague International Court. And there were a lot of very interesting landmark precedents that I don't want to go into details, but you can see how the situation was already boiling, how already there was all the controversies and all the very important conflicts that later ever sort of progressed or developed into war situation. And after the First World War, the League of Nations incorporated the court. So they said, okay, let's have that as or one of our organs. And it's very interesting that for the next 13 years, there were more and more very important issues that they could handle. For example, the case of Greenland. You know that Greenland was a Danish colony, but also the Norwegians. Right now, Trump wants to buy it, and maybe the Hague International Court will be disregarded because it's a business affair. But anyhow, the Norwegians and the Danish both wanted to have access to the island, and they were, I mean, they are very close to each other, but they were ready to start a kind of armed confrontation. And then the Hague International Court ruled for Denmark, and Norway accepted the ruling, and peace was created in this island, which has a major strategic importance, and already that was very clear in the 20s and the 30s. It was functioning in HUD until 39, and already when Hitler invaded Holland, it moved to Switzerland. So the memory failures shaping the new institution, the International Court of Justice had to learn how to work on, and after the Second World War, which was absolutely unavoidable with legal means, they started to have it as an organ of the United Nations, and the General Assembly elected the 15 judges, and the first court case was introduced in May 22nd in 47. And only judicial and not political matters, that is also very important, that international relations by the Hague Court can be handled only when there are no serious political interests are involved, and they are shaping international relations in a different level than the political kind of affairs. And historical controversies were reinterpreted in legal terms. That is also very interesting if you examine case by case what they were working on. And the legal narrative was replacing the political narrative. And it is also very interesting. You may remember certain issues like the Danube Dam with Slovakia and Hungary, how and who was the one, and how it was a political issue, but it was solved with legal terms that not necessarily observed by the parties involved. Establishing a pool of collective memory applied in disputes, that is also very important for historians, so that is a fantastic documentation. And also the law or overwriting tradition replacing the use of force, and conventional conflict management was replaced on planned to be replaced. And historical conflicts were repositions, reinterpreted, but I wouldn't say that they were resolved. And then there is the United Nations, which is one of the most important, if not the most important, global kind of international organization. And we can see all the difficulties, and we have been talking about that already. It was historically conceived, and the name United Nations was all these nations who were united against these Axis powers, against the fascists, against us, as André Erdős told on Monday, that we are still the enemy powers by the Charter of the United Nations. And it was also 10 years that all those countries who were responsible, in quotation mark, for the Second World War were not admitted to the United Nations. It is also a very interesting story, because it was a kind of Cold War bargain. How many Soviet-dominated countries can enter the UN, and how many from the Western Bloc. It is also very important that the very first steps were taken during the war. So the name United Nations was used by Roosevelt and Churchill still in 41 and 42. So years before the United Nations as a concept of an international organization was established. And it was also very important to learn that the League of Nations was a major failure. partly because the United States stayed outside. They had the idea, they were wonderful to give advice to us, but they just didn't want to get involved. Woodrow Wilson and the others. And then after the Second World War, they understood that they had to be involved, and then that was a totally different dynamics. And also, in the case of the League of Nations, we know that the winners were in a sort of dictating their conditions. And after the Second World War, it was not the same tough as before. Obviously, the unprecedented bloodshed of the Second World War enormously helped that now we shall be united and we shall never let it happen again. And also, which was extremely important, the atomic bomb and the Atomic Energy Commission of the United Nations. It's one of the first commissions that was established. And the great Danish physician Niels Bohr, who was also involved in the invention of the atomic bomb, was the one who very, very forcefully initiated that the United Nations had to do something about also the atomic bomb, and we can see that right now in the case of Iran, how it works or may not work. And it's also very important that both democratic and totalitarian powers were working together to establish the United Nations. So it's a very important amalgam. And there was a fantastic sort of compromise in the charter, which they were working for months and months, first in London and then in San Francisco, broken into small working groups. And these working groups were negotiating with each other for weeks and for months. And then a consent was established, the charter was created, and disregarded with many members of the very signatories. And yet there was a hidden narrative, unresolved controversies inside, as we can see in 4 dramas. As my time is running very fast, I'm afraid, I will just briefly mention these 4 dramas. I'm very happy to comment on each of them. And just to show that even if the United Nations seems the only possibility, and Katalin Bogyai was very, very convincing to explain that it's not possible to replace, it's not possible to just eliminate and start anew, so we have to do something about that. And meanwhile, there were these major failure stories. There were several success stories as well. But anyhow, I just want to show you some cases when obviously personal tragedies were expressing something much deeper than the controversies of the United Nations. One was Abraham Feller, a legal genius, very, very much involved in the creation of the charter. He was a Harvard Law School student and a fantastic mind, and he committed suicide in 1952 when there was this kind of extreme right-wing McCarthyan witch hunts, and they were suspecting that everybody's a communist who is working in a global peace and so on. And we do not know, he just fell out of the window of his apartment from the 12th floor and died. And we do not know what was happening with him, and maybe we shall never know that. There is the wonderful Andrei Januarievich Wyszynski, who was the first representative of the Soviet Union of the United Nations, and who was the chief prosecutor of the Stalinist show trials. So you can imagine how it is to sit at a table with a common criminal who was, a serial killer with legal terms during the Stalinist purges. And he was the one who, from the Soviet side, helped to shape the United Nations. And he was representing his country for several years. So this is also a very important moment at the very birth of the United Nations. And there was Dag Hammarskjöld, who was probably until today the most successful person, the most successful Secretary General of the United Nations. He replaced Turguli, who was the first Secretary General, and he just couldn't do anything during the major controversies of the Cold War. And when Hammarskjöld took over the prestige of the United Nations, all the very important actions of the United Nations, like the management of the Suez crisis and many other important international issues, were masterfully solved, unlike the Hungarian situation, unlike the situation in Congo, where he wanted to make peace. And there was a plane crash in Congo, and we by now exactly know that the Western secret services were responsible for shooting down the Secretary General of the United Nations they created when he just overcrossed some of the boundaries he shouldn't have. And there is the story. I am working already for more than 30 years, Paul Bang-Jensen, who was a Danish diplomat, a wonderful personality, who first was involved in the Palestine-Israeli, the so-called Palestine Reconciliation Committee, and who was later involved in the Hungarian 56 revolutions that was followed by a special committee on the problem of Hungary. And he all the time sort of suspected that there is something fishy in the United Nations in the 38th floor, so maybe that there is a much larger Soviet influence there than it should be. And then he was fired from the United Nations, and when he didn't give up his fight, he was found dead in Alley Pond Park in Long Island. There is his body, and until today we do not know whether he was killed or he committed suicide. So memory politics in international institutions and how it's embodied in the United Nations, so we can see that all these are shaped by history and shaping our history as well. Memory is institutionalized, which is very controversial, documented, archived, and very often recycled. And it's always a collective meeting place, the United Nations, the Hague International Court, the Red Cross, and a space for discussions, and different traditions, mentalities, behaviors have to meet and have to form a compromise there. And also hopes for changes versus inbuilt contradictions, like, as we were talking about the veto power in the Security Council, that totally paralyzes the United Nations in the most critical moments. And also the achievements of the Charter were extremely important, and repeated violations by the signatories. And documenting history, if there is no chance for influencing it, this is why it's so important that the United Nations has a fantastic archive where you can find all the very, very important international conflicts, whether solved, resolved, or unresolved, but documented there. And it's wondering if we are really united by the United Nations. Is it possible at all for such a globe that we are living in now? Once the war was over, it seemed that people can be united by, it was over 80 years ago, and maybe the differentiations are much larger than the willingness to be united. So if there is a global collectivity, it is more reflecting our character and not our visions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, András, for this really wide-scoped keynote speech. Now we will follow up with the cases, the case studies by panelists, and now I would like to call on Astrea Pejovic for. Oh, Nikolovska, yes, of course. Astrea is a very good friend of iASK. She's a former fellow and currently now working at the Czech Academy of Sciences, and they're involved in this great project which is transnational, and it's on memory politics. And so she will give us a case study, a chapter from this project that she's working on currently.
Thank you so much. I would like, of course, to thank iASK for inviting me again here. And this project where I work currently on, wait, I want to time myself so I don't get, too elaborate. Yes, so this project that I'm currently working on is called Memory and Populism from Below, and my interest in memory and populism actually kind of this nexus of memory and populism started here at the fellowship that I had with iASK when there was a group of scholars who were working on memory, group of scholars who were working on themes related to populism, and then in the dialogues between us we realized that there is definitely a lot of shared space between the two disciplines, sub-disciplines, however we call them. And together with Jody, we made a little workshop about these nexuses, which ended up in a wonderful book edited by Jody and Dimitar Nikolovsky that you all listened to yesterday. And I wrote an introduction to the book, and then we have a group of case studies that follow to support these ideas, and I encourage you to, I stupidly not put the book on on my PowerPoint, but Jody can lead you to the library to where you can find the book, and it was Routledge, right? Yeah, it was Routledge, and it's called Memory and Populism, Memory, Politics and Populism in Southeastern Europe. So yes. Yes, it's not only because I'm involved, but I think it was a really nice and successful book. So my interest, hence, is something quite related still to it, and I'm going to tell you something about a building, which was the General Staff of the Yugoslav Army and the Ministry of Defense in socialist Yugoslavia, and then in Yugoslavia from the 1990s under Slobodan Milosevic. It was a modernist architectural masterpiece done by the architect Nikola Dobrovic, and it was built, as you can see, within these 10 years of early socialism. However, in 1999, during the bombing of Yugoslavia, the building was hit, and even though it's not completely clear from the photo, it was basically completely destroyed, and it was unable to use to serve the purpose afterwards. So what happened in Yugoslavia or Serbia after 2000 was that there was a change of regime in October 2000, and a period of time called democratic transition started. And already at the beginning of 2000, there was a rumor that this building is going to be sold, destroyed, and repurposed. So the group of architects organized, and they managed to gain the status of the cultural monument, or cultural heritage, to the building. Already in 2007, as you can see on this slide, there were first attempts to revoke the status. So the thing is, within the Serbian law, if a certain building has a status of cultural heritage, the building can be repurposed, but it has to stay in the same shape. So potentially this particular building could be something else, but it has to look as it looked originally. So as certain person, Srboljub Panic, said, it was basically just too expensive for any investor to buy the building as a cultural monument, so it would be the best to tear it down. However, this didn't happen, and we had another change of government somewhere around 2012, where certain politicians from political elites from the 1990s returned to power, and we can say that we entered a new political chapter that we could call illiberal transition. And at that point, the current president of Serbia was a minister of defense, and he announced that investors from the Emirates are going to take the Generalstab building and remake it into a luxury hotel. Nothing happened in 2013 as those investors turned to another mega project in Belgrade called Belgrade Waterfront, and I will not go into the details about that. I don't know, maybe somebody mentioned it yesterday. However, in 2013, Donald Trump showed up, and he met with one of the people from the government, also expressing the interest to invest into the building and, again, make a luxury hotel. Nothing happened at this point as well. Trump also didn't start with the investment. And then the state tried to use the building to build a museum to a medieval ruler dynasty of Serbia. So it was some kind of a state building, nation building project that they wanted to channel through the building. But that also didn't happen. What actually happened was that the building was gradually dismantled, because the statics of the building changed due to the bombing. The building started to be a threat to the city, so the state was working on the building, but nothing actually happened to the ruin. It stayed as the ruin in the city. Which brings us to the last winter, when Jared Kushner showed up in Belgrade and made a deal with the Serbian government to get the building for free for the lease of 99 years, with the possibility to prolonging the lease. And for that occasion, the state actually revoked the status of the cultural monument, which means that the company behind Jared Kushner, who is a son-in-law of Donald Trump, who, if anybody doesn't know this little detail in his private life, could destroy the building and build something new. So the plan of Jared Kushner was to build this. Yes, very Belgradian, right? So he announced this on his Instagram page with a nice little text following how Serbia is a perfect place to invest and so on and so forth. You can find it on his Instagram. The thing is that what is happening, what I'm showing you here, actually, I don't know if any of you remember, somewhere in the winter this year, there was an AI video of Trump's plans for Gaza. So after the ongoing genocide ends, there is an idea to build the luxury resort at the coast. So this project that is very much real, as we see, and the state is already taking the actions to act towards building of these buildings, is something that belongs actually to this nexus of post-war restructuring through these populist governments. And this is actually something that brings us to my topic. This was the introduction. And what I'm interested is these contradictions that can bring together governments that in an idea stand against the West but still collaborate with the West. So what is important to understand this case is that Serbian memory politics and the memory of NATO bombing is very much rooted into the opposition with the West. It is very much framed within this populist politics, us versus them, where us represent innocent Serbs who were attacked by the evil West, where history behind the Kosovo war, behind the old 1990 wars are completely silenced. Entire history is mostly aestheticized to different commemoration projects, and the Serbs are imagined within this politics as an innocent group who was attacked by the evil West. So I think what this case, this building can teach us and help us to understand is basically how populist regimes that are mushrooming all around the world now are managing to reconcile these anti-West sentiments that are channeled through memory politics with these strategic alliances with the Western capital. So idea behind this is to develop some sort of theory about the bridging of these contradictions, and in which we have investments and capitalism as some sort of a framework for healing. So it is I call it counter-liberal movement that frames memory not through classical transitional justice coming to terms with the past tropes, facing the crimes from the past, but turning to the future, to the investments, and completely turning to capitalism as some sort of a healing process. Within this contradiction, foreign investors are also framed not as people who come to conquer again, but as people who recognize this place where they did the wrongdoings as place where they now can collaborate and build space anew. So there is this coalition that is recreated. And contradiction becomes a feature. It's not the weakness of this type of regimes, because it, while covering these two registers of both domestic nation building and at the same time foreign investments, these governments actually manage to confuse the critics, they divide the opposition, and because they manage to cover two registers. And they also flirt with this general political apathy that is, you know, easily find everywhere where we look around, where people say all the politicians are same, but at least these people do something. They get rid of this ugly ruin and build something new. And also, in a way, they establish dominance because they show that they govern not through some bounded space of politics, but they elevate themselves above the norms. And last thing I'm going to say, I hope I'm not too much over time, is yes, what is very important is to kind of zoom out a little bit from this particular case, is to see what type of context this type of regimes create. And these are contexts that are very much, where media is very much controlled, messaging is completely segmented, the government communicates partially with partial groups, everybody gets the portion of information that is aimed to, and it is very hard to perceive the totality of any case in question. For example, on the example of this building, in media you would never hear about it as some sort of a cultural monument, you would never hear about the history behind it, you would also hear about it as some sort of a ruin that, you know, exists in the city. Of course, public sphere, because of these things, is very much fragmented, and there is no space where critique can be fully addressed and can reach wider audiences. And what is for me very interesting is this third point, which is neutralization of critique, where the government is, while critiquing the opposition who is standing and activists who are standing against the ruination of the building, they say for them that they are foreign mercenaries, and it is not that they protect Serbian cultural heritage, but they want to bring their own investors to build something else. And it is something that Naomi Klein is developing in her new book, Doppelganger, which she calls Mirror World, which is basically that critique doesn't address the opponent with some type of new argument, but it is the constant mirroring and replication of narratives. So I warmly recommend the book. I think it's really nice, and it gives us a framework to think about these things. So I would stop here. I hope this was enough, and I'm happy to answer anything further. Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful, and maybe a part 2 for the volume is already in my head circling. So maybe we can talk about it, because I got several questions. Okay, and our next speaker is Afrim. You've already met him yesterday in the afternoon, and can we please have the presentation? He will have the case study of Kosovo, and he'll address collective memory, past, present, and future dimension in past, present, and future dimensions. So we are curiously waiting your contribution, Afrim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, everyone. Listening to the 2 previous speakers, and especially the first one, András, I just went back when I was reading a book, a memory from Solferino, as a fundament of establishment of the Red Cross. And that time, and then after the Solferino, a number of other events like Brian Kellogg Pact, UN documents and stuff like that made me believe that we are stopping the war. We are just trying to create the nice stories in order to create the positive memories. First of all, in my country, and then beyond my country also worldwide. But the situation proves something different, and I'm going to present in front of you the collective memory, past, present, the future. Of course, in short, because it needs longer time to talk specifically for different pictures and different memories we have from the past. First of all, I wanted to reflect into the historical overview of the collective memory in Kosovo, which I have divided into two. The first period, which is linked with the legal and constitutional position Kosovo had in former Yugoslavia, so constitutional and cultural developments under former federal Yugoslavia. And the second is war, independence, and integration process, which is somewhat a different perspective, a different picture, which creates a memory for Kosovars. The first one I have divided a few years ago. I wrote a book with some of my colleagues in France from Nice universities, the EU perspective for the Southeast Europe. And we spoke for the political developments in former Yugoslavia. So I have named it from integration toward disintegration, speaking for integral federal Yugoslavia, and then moving toward the disintegration. We have divided this period of time into two periods, or into two dimensions, or into two theories. The first one, centralist theory, which meant, I believe that it is common, is familiar for everyone, centralist, kind of centralization of the power in a center. I'm talking here exactly for the capital of Yugoslavia, Belgrade, in that time. And then these political developments were followed up by the constitutional changes which happened in 1945, 1953, and 1963. Followed also by the cultural developments, which I consider the dark history of Albanians in general, in Kosovo in particular, under the former federation. In other words, whatever happened from the constitutional side as well as from the political perspective can be seen and is seen only from the negative memory and negative perspective. The second theory, or the second period of time, is what I have named the decentralist theory. I'm talking here for the period between 1966 till end of 80s. Actually, there is no specific year when this period of time ended up, because it was not a decision, but more than a decision, it was a process of breaking up Yugoslavia, or dissolution process, which was followed by two main points reflected by the constitutional changes. The first one, 1974, which seen from Kosovo perspective is explained with the positive terms, because this was maybe the only momentum in a former Yugoslavia where Kosovars were granted with some rights, not maybe the same as other nations in Yugoslavia, but at least some similarities, very close to other republics, but still without a name of republic, without being equally recognized as other nations in Yugoslavia. But this period of time, of course, was very short, because it was followed up by the constitutional changes of 1989. I'm talking exactly here for the time when Milosevic came in power in Serbia, and he took Kosovo as a target to start the process of dissolution. And the first thing was the abolition of Kosovo constitution and other cultural developments. So we have here a controversial developments reflecting the constitutional changes. The first one in a positive side in 1974, and the second one with the abolition of the constitution, then old memories, because it was followed up with a direct installment of institutions from the center, meaning from Belgrade. Let me try to present in front of you 5 main dimensions which help, or which had an impact of creating a collective memory in Kosovo. The first is refugee crisis. The second is the war, and we heard a little bit in previous presentation. You know, lots of different interpretation of this war. International involvement, proclamation of independence, and the last one, the way ahead, the way toward the EU integration, something I spoke with you, my dear colleagues, yesterday. Refugee crisis, of course, as I said at the beginning, maybe I need more time, but every war everywhere is followed with the refugees. But in Kosovo case was another dimension, because these refugees were not only those people living in areas where the battle was taking place, but it was a campaign of a state to deport, a campaign of a state for ethnic cleansing, aiming at the end of the day the change of the population structure. So in this picture here, you have some of images of the refugee crisis in Kosovo. The child being breastfed is a graduated professional now. She often, with her mom, presents in the Kosovo public and wider. And of course, such images create contradictory memories. The first one, of course, the negative one, but with the involvement or with the support of international actors, then we just turn to the positive memory, because we have this child as a professional now, and of course not only this one, but many others who turn back home, follow their dreams, and there are more, lots of professionals nowadays. The war is another topic. The war, when I refer to the war, being aware that I need more time, maybe I just wanted to explain it through a single slide. Because, first of all, the war, I have to reflect into the war between Kosovo Liberation Army and the Serbian forces, and later on, the involvement of NATO. So there are different perspectives, legal and political perspectives. KLA members who later on will establish the Kosovo security forces are serving as a guarantee of peace and stability for all Kosovo citizens. So you can see from the pictures here, the first one is the welcoming international forces here after the capitulation of the Serbian regime and withdrawal of Serbian forces, and afterwards a peaceful Kosovo army is established, which is in a way of being standardized and being and matching the NATO and international standards. Of course, these both are in two arguments in creating the positive memory, at least for the period after the war in Kosovo. Proclamation of the independence of the country, it is not a moment maybe to discuss for the political perspective, because it will take much time. But I just present here a slide as a positive, or as a conclusion of a long-lasting process. Lots of victims, lots of failures, lots of international and wars and victims which took part in the process. And then at the end of the day, of course, in a coordination with international actors, we go to this momentum, which in the eyes of Kosovars, or in a perspective of Kosovars, is seen positively, especially having into consideration the close cooperation with international actors, as we can see here from the very first sentence when Kosovo leaders declare that we, the democratically elected leaders of our people, hereby declare Kosovo to be an independent and sovereign state, and then read the declaration of the independence. Of course, this is one, or maybe the best memories or best positive memories for Kosovars, as it was an objective or a political objective for a long-lasting process, maybe from back to the history, but especially from the end of the Second World War, where Kosovo was fully and forcibly integrated into the structures of Yugoslav Federation. An interesting story are missing people, and you see here a mother, Ferdonia Cherkezi, a mother from Jakova, who lost her husband and 4 sons. Every night prepares a dinner and waits with hope that they will come back home. She converted her house into the museum. And this is only one example, creating these very sensitive memories. So she lost everything, but whatever happened to her, she is still with hope. And this, as I said, it is one case. There are many other cases when missing persons or state institution, and no one knows for the fate of hundreds and thousands of missing people in Kosovo. So Ferdonia Cherkezi is a symbolic an example of a negative or a very sensitive creating collective memories for Kosovars. You know that, yes, again, back to, yeah, I'm closing. Going back again to the Solferino, we hope that even during the war, there are some rules which have to be respected. But it doesn't happen all the time. In many times, something on the contrary happened. And we see that, you see here that in Kosovo case, rape is used as a weapon during the conflict, during the war. So around 20,000 women have been raped during the war in Kosovo. So rape was used as a weapon during the war. In remembrance of this crime, a memorial of raped women named Heroinat, which is in English heroines, is built by 20,000 coin medals in the capital city of Prishtina. Newborn is a symbol of a proclamation of independence of Republic of Kosovo, repainted with the flags of the countries that have recognized Kosovo independence. It's a symbolic which was built in the first day when the Declaration of Independence is proclaimed. And every year it is repainted with different nations. One of the anniversaries of the Kosovo independence was repainting with the flags of all those who recognized Kosovo. Everyone, or seen from Kosovo perspective, it creates a positive memory. A conclusion, because I saw the chair saying that stop here. Yeah. Let me conclude that the act of remembering and sharing collective trauma not only helps to preserve the memory of past events, but also has a significant impact on future generations. So the idea is how to return or revert from the negative side to the positive one. In the case of Kosovo, the traumatic experience of the 90s have shaped the identity of the nation. For Kosovars, the memories of the war and its aftermath have become integral of the national identity. For younger generations who did not live through the war, but have inherited its legacy, the preservation of collective memory is essential to their understanding of their national history. And the last one, in addition to shaping national identity, collective memory also plays a critical role in promoting reconciliation and preventing future violence. Thank you.
Thank you for this concise overview of patterns of and kind of building blocks of Kosovar collective memory. I have several questions, but I will save them for later. Now we will have a different aspect of memories coming from post-conflict region of Slovenia and Croatia. And we will get to know how conquering mountain peaks, what conquering mountain peaks have got to do with nationalism and internationalism, and to the formation of memory narratives. And Zala Pavsic, our fellow, who is currently a fellow at iASK, will be addressing this very topic. So, Brotherhood of the Rope.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and also thank you very much to my predecessors to giving me some nice threads to follow up. So, for example, when Afrim was talking about this woman who created a museum out of her own personal trauma, you have to research. You have to imagine this research in a similar manner. That is, how is it relevant? Why is a friendship between two alpinists, one so Stipe Božić coming from Croatia and Viki Grošelj coming from Slovenia, not just relevant for nationalism, but national and building national narratives, but also how does this transformation occur in the first place? And this is basically the questions that I'm asking with my research. So as you must have understood by now, I'm a microhistorian to begin with, but I also, because I'm primarily interested in friendship, engage with some sociological literature, which is also more leaning towards exploring micro communities and not just like thinking top down, but also considering the bottom up. I lately became a huge fan of banal nationalism, and I see it as my primary concern to show people that friendship / brotherhood / personal relations are also a very strong part of banalisms, but I think we haven't researched them properly just yet. In the last sections, these are Slovene scholars who have been recently working on project related to alpinism, mountaineering, and also did a comparative study on Polish mountaineering literature, Polish history of mountaineering. So yes, we do have a proper professor sitting at the University of Ljubljana, who's the primary expert on history of Slovene alpinism, and who we are talking to right now is the expert of friendship, who is kind of continuing their work from a different perspective. So my work is basically why I started following their narratives was a recent exhibition in the Slovene Alpine Museum. That is, now you see how big the sport is in Slovenia, how relevant it is for our national identity and national collective memory, imaginarium, whatever. So this exhibition appeared Viki and Stipe, 50 years of friendship, together with a catalog in 3 languages, so Slovene, Croatian, and English, in which Viki and Stipe are described as one of the longest-standing rope teams in climbing worldwide, and as an example of excellent cooperation between neighboring countries. They're also both honorary members of Slovene-Croatian Friendship Society, and in their project of emphasizing their cooperation, they also made a documentary, cooperated in a documentary movie, Himalayan Warriors, which was directed by Zehrudin Isakovic from Bosnia, and produced by Al Jazeera Balkans, and of course, apart from appearing in interviews, apart from filming documentary movies, what alpinists also like to do to brag about their performances and achievements, they like to write books. So one of the primary books that I was reading was K2, Triumph and Tragedy, but more after that. So how do they meet? How do Stipe and Viki meet? So in 1972, Stipe Božić is sent to compulsory military service in the Yugoslav National Army, and he's sent to Bovec, which means he's sent there with an assignment to work on the demarcation of the mountain border between Slovenia and Italy, and there he meets Vicky Groschel, and what appears in their narrative is that they're both dreaming the same dream. This dreaming the same dream is something that in friendship literature indicates that the pair concerned has something that they have some point in the past and they have some point in the future for which they probably will continue their cooperation. They will remain close because this is what's tying them. This is what's tying them together. And they do in fact remain in contact and also reunite in 1979 Everest expedition, which is probably one of the most well known and in collective memory, the one that's most perpetuated stories of this triumphant Yugoslav cooperation, because basically Yugoslavs went to Everest and established the fifth route, so a new original route. But also, when you listen to the documentary, what they're emphasizing is, so if we go back a little bit, the documentary was entitled Himalayan Warriors, right? Soldiers fighting side by side, and this is a metaphor they play very well with, and also in their narratives, this is what you get against. So that we should organize the expedition to Everest as a military assault. We are brothers fighting for the same cause. Again, we have the same dream, and we share this homosocial solidarity in this moment when. In this moment when it becomes clear that Vicky Groschel will not make it to the top because of frostbite, Stipe Božić then recalls how he brings him a token from the top of the mountain, which he reaches, and thereby also expresses his feelings of solidarity, even if somebody is not going to make it to the very end. What's also important here is that Stipe Božić in fact makes it to the top in the second round. Means that technically speaking, he was not the first Yugoslav to get to Everest, because the first rope team to make it were two Slovenes, Nate Zaplotnik and Andrej Štremfel. So if you're going to look at the newspaper Delo from that period, when they're going to say who are the first Yugoslavs, it's going to be them. And Stipe Božić makes it to the top in the second round in 2 days afterwards. What is also important in these warrior narratives is the narrative of death, which is also another feature which connects the topic of soldiering with the topic of friendship, because in a way, as we saw before, the token of, okay, he can't make it because of the frostbite, I'm going to continue his work. And here the idea of death is also the idea of continuing, not just mourning after somebody, mourning the personal trauma, but also continuing somebody else's deeds. And here also we encounter in the examples that I'm going to give you right now, because now we're moving to the actual sources, is a twist which occurs at K2 in 1993, which Stipe Božić narrates for an interview with the Croatian newspaper Globus. And in that instance, you must know that Croatia is already well in war, not just not just with Serbia, but also with Bosnia. And Stipe Božić is actually involved as a commandos who is coaching other soldiers to fight in Knin, for example, right? So when he's talking about his mountaineering expeditions, the soldiering metaphor is not primarily about his mountain as a conquest, but him being affiliated with his country. So here you see the order. I'm a member of military special forces first. Secondly, I actually conquered these peaks, right? And then, of course, in this order, you should also be reading the death of his Slovenian friend almost as part of his cause, right? And thirdly, which is super important, I did not stick the Croatian flag on the top of the mountain because the wind blew it away. And here you can also then see the way the death of Boštjan gets portrayed as if basically it's not his personal trauma, but the trauma of a soldier who lost another soldier on the battlefield. And then the topics of the flags on top of the mountains and inventing a national tradition is also evident in another expedition, the one they took part in, both Viki Grošelj and Stipe Božić, right, in 1991. And that was the one on going to Kanchenjunga. And what you can see on this picture is not just the Croatian on the top of the world, which this is what the title says, Zastava Hrvatske na krovu sveta, right? You also see that underneath it says that the picture was made by his friend Viki Grošelj, right? So this is how you should imagine translating personal narratives or something that's supposed to be about friendship into a national narrative. This is what remains then for a national community of fellow readers to digest, right? I also liked in this interview the way he said Croatia has, so this means we have good mountaineering. Croatia has been on the top of Mount Everest, K2 and Kanchenjunga. Croatia has been, that is, and these are basically the peaks Božić has climbed, not anybody else. So I am l'état c'est moi, almost, right? In this sense. This is also an example that I like even more. Kanch je naš, so Kanchenjunga is ours. Who is the we? Is it just the Croats? Is it also the Croats and Slovenes? To be completely honest, this was an international expedition, so it also involved two Polish ladies who also had their own kind of goals why they joined the expedition, right? And the funny thing for me is that logo, Kanch 91, which has a Black Panther in it. And so in 91, pre-91, this is a period where not just Croatia is awaiting its independence, but also Slovenia, and this is a period where both countries are seeking new symbols and new imaginaries, how to convince, which is trying to distance them from Yugoslavia. And the Black Panther was part of this theory that the Slovenes are coming out of. It was called the Venetian theory, that Slovenes are actually Venice, and afterwards, after 90 something, so it never became a full symbol, but if you see it now, it's very much a disputed symbol, a very nationalistic symbol, right? But the whole theory was also disbanded as a total invention, which is something that obviously is kind of forgotten from the whole alpinist picture. And here we also have a short, so in the documentary what they also talk about is the way they were filming these pictures, right, on the top of the mountain. And Stipe Božić was super peculiar about this because he was a film and videographer himself, so basically all the video footages that Slovenes have, they have it because of him. And they have a whole anecdote in this movie how Vicky didn't know how to move the camera and they have to do it again, and it's like on the top of 8,000-meter high mountain discussing, no, it's not okay, let's do it again. But then comes Vicky's turn, and Slovenia at that time, pre-independence, as I told you, seeking for new symbols. We didn't have a symbol just yet in our flag, so everybody was doing pictures with just like the tricolor. And Vicky here is explaining how they gave them a Slovene flag without the red star. That was the only thing we knew, that Yugoslavia will be no more, so the star will be no more, right? And then, of course, I make a photo of that on the top. When I returned, I figured out that I made a picture with the Russian national flag, because this is what Slovene flag, well, yeah. I hope there's no other Slovenes in Zoom or something. So yeah, this kind of stories are then part of my research, and the reason why I thought that it still fits kind of well with this panel is because it gives you another perspective of what internationalisms are, and András made a very nice introduction by talking about UN institutions and Red Cross, because internationalism isn't envisioned only through institutions, it's also envisioned through personal traits. And here I then, according to this example of Vicky and Stipe, gave you a section of how their narrative was changing through time, and when Yugoslavia was no more, how they started to frame their friendship. So in the first section you see a narrative based on kind of Yugos stereotypes, which could also be connected then with nesting Orientalisms, that is Orientalizing the Yugoslav other, which appears in the late 80s together with the political frictions among republics. Then the second one, you can see that both Stipe Božić and Vicky Grošelj are portrayed as to reflect independent Slovenia, independent Croatia, and their dispute around the border in the Pirano Bay, and thus access to free waters. And in the last section, you have a statement by Kurt Zimberger, who was, which is part of a documentary about the mountain Dhaulagiri. They filmed together. Which Vicky and Stipe and Vicky filmed together, and you can already see that they contextualize the documentary movie using a European metaphor. They actually don't even mention Yugoslavia in that documentary, but that also then see the European ropemanship. It's like European brotherhood could also be, right? The metaphor they could be very successfully using, and I think that I got the signal that I should slowly wrap it up. So thank you very much.
That was great. Thank you, Zala. Thank you. And finally, we have Rubin Zemon, whom you already know as well by now, and he will talk about diversity and collective memory, as far as I know. And Rubin, do you have a slide? Yes, thank you so much. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bella. Actually, yes, I will talk much more about the cultural memories and related with the diversity management and some of the stereotypes related with those, especially with the Balkan region, because here we are working in iASK about the Balkan studies and our EU Balkan Observatory. So yes, politics of memory in the Balkans. And actually, yesterday, Robert, I don't. Where is Robert today? He left. He had to go back. Yesterday evening he went back. I thought he'll be here because I had a lot of discussion with him about yesterday. Okay. He also mentioned that the politics of memory plays a crucial role in shaping national identities, political legitimacy, and in my case also in interethnic relations. So competing historical narratives serve as tools for reinforcing ethno-nationalist ideologies and maintain existing power structures. These narratives are institutionalized through the education system. We spoke these days how important is the education. In this then commemorative practices, media discourse, maybe friends, next year we have also to devote the question one panel for the media. It's very important how the media is also managing here. And state sanctioning memorials, Frankfurt hidden efforts toward reconciliation and mutual understanding. Bela mentioned in the beginning, it's not remembering, but also the forgetting is very important issue when we're talking about the culture. Okay, for me as anthropologist, the process of a nation-state building, which started in 19th century, it was a process of trauma, especially for because the shifting of the priority of the identities from the religion to the nation identity to get the priority from other side, and from the second side is the because of the you see the myth of ethnic homogeneity, there are a lot of actions of assimilation, ethnic cleansing, integration in the new nation. Actually, it is a trauma for those people who are not in a dominant ethnic community in the States. For that reason, the process of creation of the nation, we have also to see from the perspective of traumas of the people, the citizens that are different from the dominant community or the people. Okay, especially when we come into the Balkans, you know the theory of Benedict Anderson, the nations are differences of how they are imagined and constructed. Actually, for me, that's the main pillar when we are talking about the nations. And we have two mainstream concepts or models in Europe, is so-called Western or constructive, where actually I don't see any today state that is practicing this model, maybe France or Spain. And we have this ethnico-primordial concept of building a nation, which is actually much more present in Eastern European countries, but also in the Balkans. So general patterns of the state formation in the Balkan of the nations in 19th and 20th century is first national awakening or growing the national consciousness, creation of culture, literary language. So it's also, when you're talking about the Balkan creation of the literary language, it's a very tough process when we are talking about collective memory. The second is a preparation and successfully revolts and uprising. The third is foreign intervention. Generally, all the uprising in the Balkans was helped with the foreign interventions. So we will see the history. And lastly, declaration of independent status, as Afrim said, the declaration of the Kosovo state. So that's it actually how the patterns, the process were moved when the nations were created. When we're talking about the collective blame, this is much more related with the Slavic population in the Balkan that accepted the Islam religion. What are the Bosnians, the Bosniak Muslims, or Torbesh in Macedonia, or Gorani in Kosovo, and so on. So, because they accepted the Islam religion during the Ottoman Empire, in a collective memory, they are, in quotas, guilty, especially among the Slavic population. Guilty because they treat the religion and they are becoming the Turks and so on. And this collective blame, actually, it was very hard to throw out during creation of the nation state, especially in these Slavic Orthodox states. So, in the collective memory of the Balkan population, it was impossible to throw the collective blame and guilt towards the Muslims in Slavic languages. We still have that today in this trauma because they feel threatened and change their religion and becoming a Turks. Okay, we mentioned that. But also we have to be aware that the state borders in the Balkans generally are made after the Congress in Berlin 1978 and after the Balkan War and the treaty in Bucharest 1930, and actually this, for me, the artificial borders in the world, not only the Balkan, but actually what we mentioned in the beginning, these state borders became very fast through the night, also the ethnic or national borders, and we have again here a lot of actions of collective trauma. This is, for example, what was the situation in Thessaloniki in the beginning of 20th century, because the issue of Rumelia, actually the Turkish part, until 1912, the Turkish the Ottoman Empire was until the Epirus, until the Thermopylae downstairs, and Kosovo, Macedonia, and so on. They were under the Ottoman Empire. And when actually some of the scholars from the Western, they went to actually the idea of the nation is appearing or is importing in the Balkans. When they're asking the Orthodox people in Thessaloniki, what are you? Are you the Romanoi or Greek, or you are the Bulgarian or Bulgaroi? They were totally confused with that identity. So they say, what is it? We are the Christians. So it's only 150 years ago. So you see that the ethnic or national identity was not so present among the people in Thessaloniki, probably also in the provinces. So in practice, religion identification did not much conflict with the ideals of nationalism, but it's another topic. Maybe we'll talk maybe another occasion. Language was only the most obviously mark of common nationality, but not the primary definition. Okay, what is also very important for in the Balkans, when you're talking about these traumas and collective memories and so on, because between the two World War, the states took the rights to exchange the population. It's very famous, this exchange population after the Lausanne Treaty between the Turkey and Greek. So more than 500,000 Muslims were evicted to Turkey, and around 300,000 Orthodox were evicted in Aegean Macedonia or North Greece today. And but it was not only this. Then we have other issues of eviction. A lot of Albanians, Chamis from the northern Greece were moved to Albania. A lot of also Muslims for the Kingdom of Yugoslavia were moved to Turkey and so on. Actually, these are also big collective traumas that at that time for the leaders was very legitimate to exchange the population because of the homogeneity of the nation. I want to, oh, really? Okay. I wanted to stress, I don't believe, sorry. No, I have a watch here. 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. What is also very important when talking about Balkan, the Balkans is this stereotypes actually that also the Balkan people are border it. This is that the Western people have. It's related with this process of Orientalism that Edward Said splendidly explained it, what is going on among the Western people when they are stereotypizing in the people from the Orient. And of course, in that frame is the stereotypizing of the Balkan people with the so-called Balkanization, which actually started with this article of the postcode Morner in 1921 when he published it in Chicago Daily News about what is mean the Balkanization and so on. We will not now put there, but generally the stereotypes of the Balkans are Oriental, unpredictable, dangerous, chaotic, dirty, lazy, primitive, cruel, selfish, uncooperative, and so on. And the Balkan people actually have these stereotypes, and probably in a collective memory it's very hard to release these all these compliments, let's say. Okay, regarding the culture of the memories in the Balkans today, the culture of memories refer to how societies remember and interact the past, especially traumatic events such as war, genocide, and oppressions. We have the contested narratives, competing historical narratives about the 90s conflicts, so about Srebrenica, the Operation Storm in Croatia, Kosovo War, and so on. Also in Macedonia, we had a war activities 2001, then memorialization, monuments, museums, commemorative events, so Daniel revisions and transitional adjustment mechanism. This is very important because even ICTY verdicts and local courts have played a role in documenting the crimes, but their impact in a public memory is limited and often resisted, bearing in mind how many cases, we spoke with Ivan, we have with a judgment from the international court, so it's really, I don't know, ridiculous to mention. Also, we have this, let's say, negative and positive intersection between diversity and culture management. So inclusive memory project like RECOM and so on is one of the positive intersection, or educational reforms, which actually is not so much successful, but they try to make reforms. And we have a lot of negative intersection when the ethnic groups often commemorate their own victims. It's very ethnocentristic collective memory. We can talk about multicultural, intercultural, transcultural. It's very ethnocentristic. And the governments use memory to justify the explanatory policies and cement their ethnic dominance. Okay, this is a small description about the culture, diversity management, culture memory in Bosnia, Kosovo, Albania, and Macedonia, Serbia, and Croatia. I will not read. You can see it because we don't have a time. These are some of the disputes that we have among the Balkan states in a contemporary collective memory. This is the monuments of Draža Mihailović, the famous Chetnik leader during the Second World War. Today the Serbians actually, they want to make the new memorizing. I think also I heard Ivana and Astrea that in Belgrade now will make a new monument for Draža Mihailović. It's very controversial person, however. Then we have these controversies in Croatia. Jasenovac is the monuments were actually it was the concentration camp during the Ustashi or Croatian state during the Second World War. And we have this commemoration in Bleiburg where actually more than 100 Ustashi were killed in Bleiburg from the partisans. Then, of course, everybody knows about the Srebrenica. It's a very big memorial center there in Potočari. This is in Kosovo, also big memorial in Košare. There was a big fight, actually, during the war in Kosovo. And also it's very interesting. We have a monument of Bill Clinton in the center of Prishtina. There is Thanksgiving. How we call it? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Not me, thank you to Bill Clinton. We have in Macedonia, actually, when also the Albanians want to make a memorial for the war in 2001, and Macedonia and antiquity of memories of the Great, Philip the Great, and so on. This is the dispute between Bulgaria and Macedonia, but it's actually stopped the integration of Macedonia to the European Union. These are historical figures that are actually and events contextual between Macedonia and Bulgaria. Conclusions. Yeah. The consolidation of the historical narrative, terminology, and cultural memories translated to the political correct conceptual model for all groups and entities in the Balkans is one of the most important missions of Balkan states. The transition from national or local history to universal history as a synthesis of all human events and periods in the Balkans and beyond should be one of the strategic priorities in the Balkan historiography and politics of memories. The harmonization of the politically correct historical narrative and terminology towards national and other minorities and vulnerable categories in every political society in the Balkans is one of the pillars toward achieving the goal of universal history. Citizens have to much more be involved in the creation of the historiography and collective memories of civil society, but now we have the lack of contribution of the civil society. Balkan peoples and minority have to choose about priority should be given to a nation or imaginary community of nationalism, which in the Balkans very often is going to national chauvinism, or patriotism, which is actually the love of the environment, climate, place where is the born in, with all the differences in that environment. Not only environment, but only my nation and my ethnicities. Then it's a very bad. And the culture of memory historiography should be freed from the ideas of the myths of the homogeneous nations, megalo ideas or megalomania, ethnic or national superiority, or illusions of a chosen people or of Aryan superhumans. Thank you very much.